The year was 1888, and the Kansas sun hammered down on the plains, a relentless, blinding glare. I was just another ghost in the dust, Jeremiah, drifting west, chasing a whisper of something better than the wreckage I'd left behind. My boots were worn, my soul even more so, but nothing in my ragged life prepared me for the quiet horror that unfolded on that eastbound train. The air in the passenger car was a stale brew of dust, cheap tobacco, and unspoken regrets. Faces around me were a tapestry of weariness and hollow hope, each person a silent testament to the unforgiving journey. Then, a sharp, hushed argument sliced through the drone of the wheels. Near the back, a man and a woman dressed in clothes, too fine for the grit of the railroad, were locked in a venomous whisper, their faces tight with fury. Caught between them, a small girl, maybe 7, clutching a threadbare rag doll. Her eyes, I noticed, were vacant, staring into a darkness that wasn't just the inside of the train car. She was blind. I'd seen enough desperate acts in my life to recognize the cold, calculating glint in their eyes. They were arguing about her, their voices like rusty knives, each word a cut. The woman, pale and trembling, kept shaking her head, a desperate denial in her every movement. The man, a brutish lumberjack of a fellow with a thick handlebar mustache, was a storm brewing, his agitation radiating through the dusty air. Finally, a silent, chilling agreement passed between them, a grim nod that sent a shiver down my spine. This wasn't a family dispute, it was a verdict. At the next stop, a desolate speck on the map called Redemption Creek, a name that mocked the very air it occupied, they began gathering their things. The man, without a word, grabbed the girl's arm, pulling her toward the exit. She stumbled, a small, helpless sound escaping her lips, and her beloved doll slipped from her grasp, falling unnoticed onto the grimy floor. I watched, a silent witness, as they stepped onto the crumbling wooden platform. Then, with a sudden, brutal shove, the man thrust her to the dirt. "Stay there, Abby," he growled, his voice devoid of any warmth, not even bothering to glance back. The woman hesitated for a split second, a flicker of something akin to terror or regret in her eyes, before she scurried to catch up with him, leaving the little girl, a solitary, bewildered figure, against the vast, indifferent landscape. The train's whistle shrieked, a raw, mournful cry that seemed to tear at the very fabric of the desolate plains. It lurched forward, slowly, agonizingly. Gaining speed, I saw Abby, small and impossibly fragile, sitting alone on that god-forsaken platform, her face tilted upward as if searching for a sun she couldn't see, for a love she no longer had. Her doll lay forgotten, a few feet away, a mute testament to her abandonment. As the platform receded into the distance, swallowed by the swirling dust, I watched her small hands reach out, blindly grasping at empty air, her tiny, choked sobs lost in the thunderous rumble of the wheels. A cold, hard knot tightened in my gut. I knew with an absolute certainty that I couldn't just sit there. I had to do something. The conductor, a beefy man with a face like a weathered boot, gave me a look that screamed idiot when I declared I was getting off at the next unscheduled stop. "There ain't nothing out there but buzzards and bad luck, mister," he grumbled, wiping sweat from his brow. But his words were just a dull murmur against the roaring conviction in my chest. The image of that little girl, left behind like a discarded parcel, was etched into my mind, burning bright and unforgiving. I found Abby exactly where my mind's eye had placed her, a small, crumpled heap against a stack of sun-bleached crates. Tears had carved clean tracks through the grime on her cheeks, giving her face a haunted, ethereal quality. The wind, now a relentless whisper, whipped her fine brown hair across her face, tugging at the edges of her worn dress. I approached. Slowly, my every movement measured, not wanting to startle the fragile bird she seemed to be. "Hello there, little one," I said, my voice rough from disuse, yet surprisingly gentle. "My name's Jeremiah. Are you Are you all right? She flinched, a tiny, involuntary recoil, pulling back as if struck. Mama? Papa? She whispered, her voice barely a breath, infused with a heartbreaking mix of hope and terror. No, darling. It's just me, I replied, the lie catching in my throat, a bitter taste. What else could I possibly say? Your folks went on ahead. I gestured vaguely into the vast emptiness. They left your doll here. Would you like it back? Her head snapped up then, a sudden, almost desperate movement. A tiny, hopeful gasp escaped her lips, a sound that pierced through my hardened shell. I bent down, my fingers brushing against the familiar worn fabric of the rag doll, and gently placed it into her outstretched hands. Her small fingers immediately closed around it, recognizing its form, clinging to it with a visceral need. A visible shiver of relief went through her, and she clutched it tight, burying her face against its threadbare cloth, as if seeking solace from a loyal, silent friend. Earning her trust was a slow, arduous climb. She was a frightened creature, and rightly so. I offered her some water from my canteen, cool and life-giving, and a piece of dried jerky. Slowly, with an agonizing caution, she took them. We sat there for what felt like an eternity, the silence broken only by the relentless wind and the distant, mournful cry of a coyote. Piece by painful piece, I learned her story. Her name was Abby, and she had been blind since birth. Her parents, she explained in fragmented sentences, had told her they were going on a long trip, and that she had to be a big girl and wait. The raw, cruel truth of their abandonment, a silent accusation against the very world, settled heavy in the dusty air between us, as dusk began its slow descent, painting the western sky in hues of fiery orange and bruise purple. A cold, biting chill swept across the plains. Redemption Creek was nothing more than a ghost of a town, a few derelict buildings, a skeletal water tower, and an oppressive emptiness. No hotel, no general store, just the vast, indifferent silence. I knew then, with a clarity that surprised me, what I had to do. I couldn't leave her, I wouldn't. Abby, I said, my voice firm, resolute, it's getting cold, we need to find shelter. I'll be your eyes for a while, all right? She nodded, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement, but it was enough. It was everything. The first few days were a brutal dance with desperation. Abby was as fragile as spun glass, not just physically exhausted, but emotionally shattered. Every rustle of dry leaves, every distant, unfamiliar sound made her flinch, her small body tensing with fear. She'd wake from nightmares, her cries, for Mama and Papa, tearing at the silence of the vast, indifferent night. I wasn't a father, never thought I'd be, but something deep inside me, something I hadn't known existed, stirred to life. I taught her how to navigate by listening, by feeling the subtle shifts in the ground beneath her worn boots. We moved at a snail's pace, following the glint of the train tracks west, my arm a constant anchor, my voice a steady presence, painting pictures with words, the endless sweep of the plains, the distant hazy silhouette of the mountains, the surprising tenacity of the wildflowers that dared to bloom in such a harsh land. Food was a constant, gnawing worry. I'd hunt small game, with my old rifle, always making sure Abby was safe and warm first. A small fire crackling merrily against the gathering chill. One evening, a sudden, furious dust storm descended upon us, a suffocating, blinding wall of grit. I instinctively wrapped Abby in my worn blanket, shielding her small frame with my own body as the gritty wind howled around us like a vengeful spirit. Her small hands clung to my shirt, trembling with a fear I understood all too well, but she didn't cry. We emerged from that storm covered in grit, every pore caked with dust, but somehow we were unbroken. The biggest challenge, though, wasn't the relentless sun or the biting wind, but the unyielding skepticism of the few souls we encountered. We crossed paths with a handful of travelers, lone cowboys with haunted eyes, weary families crammed into battered, covered wagons. Their stares were a chilling mix of pity, suspicion, and sometimes outright condemnation. A blind child and a rough-looking drifter like me. It raised eyebrows, ignited whispers, and cast long, uncomfortable shadows. Some, with gruff kindness, offered meager provisions. Others simply hurried past, their faces averted, as if fearing. Contagion. One grizzled prospector, his face a roadmap of wrinkles weathered by 100 suns, spat tobacco juice near my boots and warned me, his voice a low growl. "That little one's a burden, mister. You'd be better off leaving her at the next orphanage." His words hit me like a physical blow, stinging with their cold, brutal truth, but paradoxically, they also solidified my resolve. Abby was no burden. She was a small, fragile spark in this vast, crushing emptiness of my life, a reason to keep going, to be better than the man I was. We faced down a coiled rattlesnake, narrowly avoiding its deadly strike thanks to Abby's impossibly sharp hearing. We endured a week of relentless rain that transformed the dusty trail into a treacherous, sucking quagmire. Each hardship, each moment of shared struggle, forged a stronger, unbreakable bond between us. Abby learned to trust my every word, my every guiding movement, with an absolute faith that humbled me. And I, a man who'd lived his life avoiding attachments, found myself caring for this little girl with a fierce, protective love I never knew I possessed. After weeks that stretched into an eternity of dusty trails and bone-chilling nights, we finally saw it. A small settlement nestled like a forgotten jewel in a sprawling, verdant valley. A cluster of sturdy wooden buildings, their raw edges softened by time, with a small, defiant church steeple piercing the clear blue sky above the trees. It wasn't much, perhaps just a blip on the grand map of the West, but compared to the desolate plains we'd traversed, it was a shimmering beacon of hope, a promise of something more. My boots were worn through to the soles, my clothes a patchwork of repairs, but Abby, despite her trials, seemed to have gained a quiet inner strength. She still clutched her beloved doll, its fabric even more worn, but now her steps were surer, more confident, and her smiles, though fleeting, were increasingly frequent, lighting up her small, brave face. We found lodging in a modest boarding house, its porch sagging with years of stories run by a kind-faced widow named Mrs. O'Malley. She was a woman whose eyes held a lifetime of quiet understanding. She took one look at Abby's small, trusting hand in mine, then at my weary, dust-caked face, and simply nodded. No questions, no judgments, just the unspoken offer of a warm meal and the luxurious comfort of clean beds. I explained Abby's situation as best I could, carefully omitting the cruel, unforgivable truth of her abandonment, choosing instead to focus on the long journey and her profound resilience. Mrs. O'Malley listened, her eyes soft with an empathy that warmed the very air around us, a rare commodity in this harsh land. Life in the settlement, though calmer, was by no means easy. I took on any odd job I could find, mending fences that sagged like old men, helping in the dusty stables, pitching in at the general store, anything to earn a few precious dollars to keep us fed and sheltered. Abby, despite her blindness, proved to be an incredibly resilient and resourceful little soul. Mrs. O'Malley, a devout woman with a voice like warm honey, began to teach her hymns and stories from the worn pages of her Bible. Abby, with her keen, intuitive ears, soaked it all in, her mind a sponge for new sounds and ideas. She started to hum soft, ethereal tunes, her voice a clear, sweet melody that brought a smile to even the most hardened faces in the dusty saloon, a quiet counterpoint to the raucous noise. One afternoon, I sat on the rickety porch swing, my gaze fixed on Abby. She was reading a book, her small fingertips tracing the raised letters I'd painstakingly carved into a smooth piece of salvaged wood for her. A profound, almost overwhelming sense of peace settled over me, a quiet contentment that transcended anything I had known before. This wasn't the life I'd envisioned for myself, not the restless, footloose existence of a drifter always looking over his shoulder, always running from something. But it was a good life. More than good, it was a life imbued with unexpected purpose, a life woven with threads of connection and genuine affection. They had cast a blind girl out, abandoned her on a train platform, leaving her to the unforgiving mercy of the vast, desolate West. But I, Jeremiah, a man who had spent his entire existence running from any form of commitment, found myself in an unexpected role, one I now cherished with every fiber of my being. I became her eyes. Yes, her literal sight in a world of profound darkness. But more than that, I became her protector, her guide, her anchor, her family. And in doing so, Abby, the little girl who had been so cruelly left behind, unknowingly gave me something infinitely more valuable than I could ever have imagined. A profound reason to truly see the world, and a place to finally, truly call home. My long, arduous journey west hadn't brought me the fortune or the escape I'd chased. Instead, it brought me something infinitely better, a forever.